Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 92 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended lifeforms are so amazingly primitive that two of them still think doing a podcast called Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea is a pretty neat idea. These podcasters have, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Actually, this is the solution. Hey, Brian, what's this?
Well, Jeff, this is the third edition of the comic book Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by IDW.
All right, the first two were so fun, we're going to continue on.
Absolutely.
And I love this cover.
Oh, yeah, this cover's pretty cool. It's got our at least three of our four recognized friends again, right?
Yep.
Ryal, Lindsay, and O'Grady, but then, is this a new one too? Kryzira? No, that was...
Kriazis,
there you go.
Kriazis or something like that. Yeah, this is a new one. And again, the inside does not specify on the copy that I have here, my digital copy.
Right.
So it's a mystery.
We see Bill and Estelle right on the cover there.
Yes, and Estelle is a little bit turned on by this bloody knife with Dirk's reflection in it.
And Dirk's looking a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I would.
As the red sheen of the knife is sparkling in his eyes, right?
Yes.
Oh, quite nice.
And they have a retro look to the background here where they use the graded dot pattern that fades out.
I like that. Yellow to black, or yellow to red, actually.
Yes. So we will go to the first page inside, which is the previously page.
Uh-huh.
And like last time, they're using all panels from the comic books before to kind of explain the story so far.
Yep.
Talking about the jewelry heist.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the ringing in the ears.
Mm-hmm.
Kate Schechter makes her appearance and stops everything and says that she's now in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Bill and Estelle decide to split up, and Estelle is going to follow the group heading toward the gala. And Bill is going to go look for the bag of tools, we'll call them, that he left behind that was stolen by Dirk. And then finally, Dirk is screaming that there is mummification in progress in the suites of the Del Coronado Hotel where the gala is about to begin.
Yep, that wraps up that page pretty succinctly.
After that, on the next page... Once again, it's a list of our characters. There's nobody new making any kind of appearances. It's all the same characters as last time. So we'll just go on to the first page of the story.
Mm-hmm. I like the way this page is laid out. It's got a full panel on the left side that goes from top to bottom. And then, of course, the story continues on the top and goes down from there. It's kind of nicely designed page. I like it.
It is very nice. So they are at the Hotel Del Coronado stairway, or stairwell, and Hamish is talking to Estelle. Obviously, Hamish does not know that Estelle is one of the copycat serial killers, so he just thinks that there's this cougar flirting with him, and he's not wrong. Instead of calling him Hamish, Kate decides to call him Hornish. And she brushes his hair and grabs his hand and, talks about previous murders in the building. And I guess I liked the last line that she said, which was that the Kate Farmer, who was the person that was murdered in that stairwell just prior to the start of the 19th century, she said was living proof that both good and bad things can happen in stairwells. And sometimes both at once.
Yes, it's quite fun. And I love Hamish's line, "Oh, is this how older people flirt?"
Right. But he's kind of oblivious to her pulling the knife out of her purse, or actually it's more of a cleaver.
Mm-hmm. Yes, from one angle it looks like a cleaver, and another it looks like a knife. So, one of those transitions.
She has one of those magic purses that is bigger on the inside than the outside, so the...
Yes, a purse of infinite holding.
Right. Or the thing that your grandmother gave you that you don't know what it's for.
Yes, a reference only the educated would get.
Right.
Or a listener to our podcast.
Yes, listen to our previous 68 episodes and see if you can discover the reference.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's pretty funny because obviously the bottom panel, she's got this very large butcher knife. Mm-hmm. But the position of the knife in her hand in that purse, it should be sticking 4 or 5 inches out the bottom of her purse.
Yes.
However, it is not. So we're going to go on to page 2 and see Hamish's fate. So Estelle is luring Hamish in, and they're just about to get friendly when Dirk comes running down the stairs in a panic, saying there's no time to waste on snogging in a stairwell or possibly murder. And Estelle is going, "Oh no, now what?" And Hamish is like, "Not now, dude, come on." And Dirk seems to wrestle the knife from Estelle.
He does.
And then she recognizes him as the bag thief and calls him out.
Right.
However, Dirk has no idea what she's talking about because he's never been confronted about actually stealing that bag to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Dirk is explaining that there's no time for this foolishness with the much larger situation upstairs. And Estelle is saying there is always time to kill.
Oh, yes. And after Dirk steals the knife from her hand, she obviously reaches into her infinite bag and pulls out another very wicked blade.
It is a wicked blade.
And she lunges towards Dirk, and it does look like his fate is sealed.
It does.
At the bottom of this page.
Yes, which you would think is the most disturbing panel on the page. However, it is not the most disturbing panel on the page.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that would be the top panel. I do not want to see the close-up of the inside of Hamish's mouth.
And his pimply face.
And his pimply face. But nice attention to detail there with the...
Yes, we will definitely give them that. An A for effort.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to page 3 of the story.
So again, this is very stylistic, this page. I really like the way they've included this action.
Mm-hmm.
Our close-up on our killer's face is quite dramatic and effective.
Yes.
And I do like the at least stylistically, this comic book is very nice. Very, very nice.
Yes. There's a lot of action and motion and running and chasing, and they've utilized the diagonal lines that helps accentuate that feeling. Because if it was just straight horizontal panels across the page, it would be very static. But
Right. Nicely laid out.
So in this, Dirk does evade the first thrust by Estelle, and he tells Hornish to get moving, of which he's going, "It's Hamish." So I'm not quite sure how Dirk knows, but he must have overheard them as he was coming down the stairwell. Mm-hmm. Estelle is still after them, and she is saying that she wants them to be her Kate Farmers, who is the woman that died just prior to the beginning of the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
As Dirk is running behind Hamish, he reaches for that ball catch toy that he was playing with in the earlier episode, and he uses the knife to cut the string and lets the ball go, which lands on the stairs, and of course, Estelle steps on the ball, slips, and Wud Bud Cluds down the stairway.
I love it. Wud Bud Cluds. So nicely done. So on the second panel on this page, Dirk and Hamish are featured, and we see in the background that Estelle yells at them, "Get back here."
Yeah, they're being chased.
And Dirk inquires, "What were you doing anyway?" And Hamish says, "Gambling on the reward, offsetting the risk." It didn't.
Right.
Oh. But I do love that ball and cup game playing back into it.
Yes. Because I was wondering what in the last issue this concentration was on him playing that just as a distraction. But it found its way into the story.
There you go.
All right. So then on to page 4. So Estelle's fall seems to have made it possible for Dirk and Hamish to get some distance away from her. And Dirk, before he goes into the lobby, feels it best not to carry a knife into there, so he plunges it into the wall, but then notices that she has her initials engraved in the handle. So, of course, all serial killers want to carry monogrammed knives and cutlery. And Hamish is pushing Dirk, saying there's crazy knife lady stabby stab behind. And he's like, okay. And they push their way into the lobby where they meet Susan and Tanya. And they're wondering what happened to them because Dirk disappeared right after he yelled down about this emergency. And Dirk said that he's been in the stairwell because he thought that would be the safer option at the time.
And of course, Crowther is making his way in behind the group as well. So
Yes.
now the 5 of them have been rejoined in the lobby.
Yes.
And Tanya is clutching her viola.
Yes.
But I do like the line. Hamish says, "Man, I thought I liked him crazy, but really do not."
Right. So on to page 5. So the 5 of them get to the reception desk at the hotel, and Dirk is talking to the woman behind there. And he is screaming about a crisis and pretty much everything uninvolved with everything that's been happening. And then Susan and Tanya are yelling to have her call the police. Call the police. And then he's like, oh, all right. And again, he tells her about a gas leak upstairs and nothing about calling the police. And then just at the very end, when he's about to tell her what happened, a disembodied voice calls out, "Friend, Dirk, that you?" So this series of panels really needs us to kind of read through some of what it's saying, because there's a lot of great lines in here that really have nothing to do with the situation that's at hand.
Do you want to be Dirk?
Sure, I'll be Dirk.
Okay.
Do you just want to read out the whole thing?
Yeah, why not? It's not that long.
All right. So, Dirk says, "Madam, please, we're in the middle of a crisis. Your help would be appreciated."
"Sir, we've had some noise complaints involving the curiously attired man, much like yourself."
"Foul deeds and rather tardy room service, I must say, are afoot here." "Wait, what's curious about my attire?"
"The coat. San Diego, summer. Now, you were saying, was there a problem with the suite?"
"Well, now that you mention, the ice machine is located frightfully far from the room."
And this, of course, is when the other characters say, "Dirk, the police! Please, have her call them." And there's a echoing refrain of Hamish, Susan, and Tanya, and I guess even Crowder with a oblong, sideways mouth.
Yes, yes.
And then we get to the third to last panel.
And Dirk goes, "Right. Of a more pressing concern than unfortunately placed ice makers is this hotel needs to be more careful about who it allows in."
And in an icy stare, she says, "Of that, I couldn't agree more."
And Dirk tells her, "Not only are your stairwells frightful, but there also happens to be a gas leak in the suite upstairs of a most severe nature. My associates and I would never interact with that sort of riffraff we've had to contend with here, let me tell you." And that's when Dirk's friend seems to call to him.
Yes, and we can speculate who that might be.
And who might that be?
I would suspect that friend Dirk comment is from Kate Schechter.
Isn't that Kate in the back, right? Like if you look at the group when they're saying call the police.
Oh,
Isn't
no.
that Kate there or
it's
not?
Tanya, Crowther, Susan, and Hamish.
Oh, that's Hamish.
Right.
He looks very womany.
Yes, he does.
Back there. Yes. Maybe we'll find out on the next page.
What a way to find out.
On to page 6.
But I'm wrong.
Yes.
Or am I? Wait a minute.
No, you're wrong.
Well, it turns out that the disembodied voice was our buddies, Craig and Holt.
Yes, so Holt and Craig are in the lobby, and they are telling Dirk that he left the party too soon because it was just getting good. At least it was for Holt. And Craig is saying, hey, ixnay on the arty pay talk. And he's like, these ancient Egyptians know Pig Latin. That's kind of interesting.
I love that.
And so Holt is, now that he has fed so much, he is coming into his godlike powers where he's becoming even stronger than Atenkamen was.
Mm-hmm.
And then the elevator opens and some of the previous partygoers literally spill out. And some of the other hotel guests are horrified that living mummies that are entering the lobby. And everybody's like, oh, gross. And Dirk is upset. And the mummies are hungry. And Holt is telling Craig that cops are going to be there soon, so we got to get out of here.
Yeah, this page is quite something. Interesting artifice here, where on the top of the front page, the fourth thing that Holt says is projected onto the panel in the back, and they're just focused on his mouth, so it looks like his mouth is a part of the wallpaper, and you know, it's much larger. Interesting angle here, but this page was quite the challenge to unravel.
Right.
But the other thing I think is kind of interesting is if you look down at the bottom right-hand part of the page and you see the members of Dirk's group, Dirk saying, oh, hell, and Hamish is saying, gross, man. And then there is Crowther with his gold phone and his solar power. Looks like it's being activated in some way.
Or is that just a flash from the camera? I can't tell which that would be. Is he taking a picture of the mummies that are coming to life with his gold phone? Or is there some sort of solar power being activated?
I'm not sure. That's a good point.
Either way, he is using his phone in some manner.
Mm-hmm. Interesting page.
So on to page 7. As Holt was telling Craig that it's time to get out of there because there's a lot to be done, Craig was really saying, I'm really not sure. And Holt starts to say, of course you do, but then he bumps into Tanya, who's holding her viola. And he sort of goes psychedelic for a moment with shapes and colors and spins and bubbles. And he kind of looks like he's holding his hands up to keep his balance. And then as soon as she disconnected from him, he came back. But Craig seems to have felt the same effect when he bumped into her. This whole first part is key to everything, I think, but I have no idea the what or the why or the how. But
yeah. Is that part of the podcast?
No. Okay. No, it's not. Not at this point. It may make it, but right now I'm just trying to figure out how to get a handle on it, because first, he didn't bump into her instrument.
No, he bumped into her and the instrument made a noise.
Or is that just a bump from her? You know what I mean? Is that just saying that they bumped each other? Because the noise is coming from the bump.
Right.
And the big star between them versus her instrument seems to be silent. But then there's all the colors.
Right. I'm assuming that some musical something is going to cause them to do something. But I don't really know. You're right that there's a disjointedness between these first two lines and the next part. Leave something for the story later. A mystery for the story.
And then Dirk shows up and just starts gaslighting Holt, telling him that these reborn deities are nothing to be afraid of, and they're not all they're cracked up to be, and that the only thing that he has been since his rebirth is a regrettable annoyance. And then in the middle of them arguing back and forth, and Craig is telling Dirk not to provoke him, Estelle, shoeless and beat up and torn nylons, comes running down the stairs into the lobby saying, "Die, damn you!" And then she trips and stabs Holt instead of Dirk. And Dirk is like, right on cue.
Oh, the interconnectedness of all things, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. The panels on the top show the interaction between Tanya and Holt. And then in the second part of the page, we get a picture of Dirk, and he looks remarkably like one of the characters from Rick and Morty.
Yes, he does.
Sort of like a whistling face. And I do like the comment. He says that the actual reborn God Kings are truly the worst. All that sense of entitlement channeled through curses involving bugs. Quite tedious.
Yes. Very displeased face on Holt over here.
Mm-hmm. And of course we see Estelle driving the knife, and this is the interesting part in my opinion. She's got the original knife, not the second one she pulled from her purse.
Well, she probably pulled it out of the wall. That's just on the other side of where she is.
From. You're right.
That's where he left it.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that detail.
So we'll move on to page 8. All right, so there's a lot going on this page. With
Absolutely.
Estelle is sitting astride Holt, wanting to finish the job, and Holt is all upset that he was stabbed. And Dirk is talking to Craig, saying, "Hey, have you had enough of this megalomaniacal friend of yours?" And Craig is thinking, I think I have. Holt is telling Estelle that he's not that easy to kill, and she prefers hard over easy, which we already know. And then here's a kind of a critical line that I want to pay attention to, because Craig is saying that borrowing a little life force is one thing, but that got out of hand upstairs at the party. And Dirk keyed in and is like, wait, borrowing, you say? So there's something about borrowing, not stealing.
Right.
This life force. And then finally, Holt gets up, and he's got Estelle by the wrist, and he is about to suck the life out of her. And Dirk is talking with Tanya, because she's been there for the whole thing and sees what's going on. And he's like, should we do this? And she's like, sure. And so then Dirk takes Craig, gives him to the group, and says, this man needs to be out of here now. And Hamish is like, no, dude, the cops. And Dirk finished his sentence saying, they can't be trusted with this. When it comes to homicidal women and resurrected Egyptian vampires, you need a holistic detective. So I'll join you soon.
Well done. That's quite the confusing page when you look at it. And you're right, that's the critical point. There's a lot going on here. And of course, Craig appears to have now defected from the group. On the left bottom panel of the page is where Neferhotep, or Holt, has grabbed Estelle by the wrist. And he says, even this odd and colorfully garbed assassin cannot stop Neferhotep the First.
I think that's my favorite line on the comic so far.
Oh my gosh. And at that point, the knife is sticking into the ground. And
yes,
Estelle is wreathing in pain. Wreathing or writhing?
Writhing?
Estelle is writhing in pain. Oh my goodness.
So on to page 9.
Wow, the instant we turned the page here, I was impressed by this panel. It's a full bleed page top to bottom, and it's got a small 4-panel insert in the middle, but It's a picture of Holt clinging to the arm of Estelle. And she, of course, is in a very desiccated state with her life force leading out of her mouth, and Holt's eyes and mouth are sucking in that life force.
Right.
Quite interesting.
And he is now impressive looking.
Oh, he is, quite indeed.
Or more than impressive, I'd say frightening.
Yes, very much so.
So he says that his wound is healed, the assassin felled, and he's never been stronger. This century is mine. So he is ready to take on the world.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, Dirk arrives. And Holt also wonders where Craig is. But then he decides that he doesn't need Craig because that means more energy for him. And then he spots Dirk. And he's like, wait, you. And Dirk is like, me? Again? I know there's always one, but why is it always me?
Oh, my goodness.
So Holt's about to come down on Dirk and feed on him, but then we can see that there are sirens in the distance, and Holt knows that that clarion sound only ever signifies trouble, and that there's going to be more chances for him to get Dirk, and he will sate his hunger on many others first.
Wow, quite a page. I'd love to have this page signed by the author.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Amazing.
So page 10. After Holt left, Dirk is kneeling on the floor next to the desiccated body of Estelle, but he doesn't know who she is. So he sees her purse and he is going to try and get some ID, figure out who she is. But then the police walk in and the FBI walk in, and while they're arguing about jurisdiction, Dirk is rifling through her purse, dumps the contents out, and looking, and then feels a gun on the back of his shoulder, and it's our friend Kate. And he's like, oh, hello, Kate. Awkward meeting you here.
Yeah, I like this page. Again, here we find at least that it's not an infinite bag of holding.
No.
But the contents that drop out are like a straight razor and a small dagger and a box cutter.
Yep.
And Dirk is rifling through, I assume, looking for a license or some kind of identification.
Which appears to be right there on the floor in front of him in the last panel with him looking at the contents.
It does indeed look like one.
So we will go on to page 11. I have a lot of issues with some of the things on this page, just trying to figure out its logistics and reasons. But it does make sense within the story.
Mm-hmm.
I was wrong to assume that it was the FBI that came in announcing they were federal agents because Dirk is talking to Kate at the museum.
Mm-hmm.
So they were at the gala at the Del Coronado Hotel. The FBI claimed jurisdiction and brought Dirk for questioning to the museum.
Well, right. I mean, I think you're right because, of course, the CIA is not allowed to operate on American soil. So the people that barged in at the gala they described themselves as federal agents, which we can assume they were FBI because that's who would have been responsible for that interaction there in San Diego, of course. And here, Kate has secluded Dirk, I suspect, on her own at the museum and is interrogating him to find out what he knows.
Right. And Dirk is giving her a hard time, saying that becoming a CIA agent is rather an abrupt turn from being the love puppet of a thunder god. And she's saying no more abrupt than you being forced out of England. And she says that people can change, they move on. And Dirk wants to know if gods can move on too. And Kate's like, hey, no, we're getting back to your case.
Right.
And he's like, me? I am the center around which all complications ensue, but am very rarely ever the cause. And she's like, oh, come off it. We've been watching you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, where have you been watching? How? How has she been watching him?
With a drone, of course.
Yeah, she's mentioned drones before, and he didn't believe her.
Well, being from New Jersey, we are a little paranoid about the drones and all.
That's right. They're all over. People send up their drones looking for drones.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. What a story that was. Of course, here in this panel, she's pointing up at the ceiling and pointing to what she describes later as her own personal drone.
Yes.
Sigrun, she calls him. Name derived from the Old Norse Sigr for victory and Run for secret.
Yes. And Dirk thinks that Old Norse is quite a romantic choice for her to use, and that must mean that she and Thor are still an item. And she said, no, all relationships can have ungodly and also quite godly amounts of problems at times. But now she's got a question for him. On to page 12. So Kate holds up a notebook and says, look at this. And Dirk says, that's perfect. And you get a close-up of the notebook, and she seems to have copied the hieroglyphics that were between the display cases at the museum. And she asks Dirk, so you know what this is? And he says, I do indeed. I've been looking for this very thing. Which to me seemed like a odd response to hieroglyphics. However, he tears off that page, and it was the notebook that he has been looking for, and he thought that there would have been one in that other bag that he had, but it had a lot of other un-notebook-like things and murdery weapons. And she's like, murder weapons? And he said, oh, that's a colloquialism. Never mind.
And I do like the center panel as they interact with the notebook because it's very flippant and very Dirk-like, as we've seen in the character.
Yes, and he just crumples up that page that she drew and tosses it over his shoulder.
Yep.
And Kate is very unhappy in the bottom panel. So on to page 13.
Oh my gosh. That's a lot of writing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
This page has the most writing on it, and I think I'm going to have the least to say about it because I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the story moves very little, but it's actually pretty funny.
It is pretty funny.
So Kate goes and picks up the piece of paper that Dirk threw over his shoulder, saying this must be relevant because it was probably written by the Vandals. And Dirk is saying, nothing so obviously relevant is ever relevant. That's the secret to interconnectedness. And she's like, don't start pulling that stuff on me. I don't want to hear anything about that. And Dirk is saying, you've got a series of unconnected events, and I'm the one who can put them together. So you need me. I need you to go into the passenger manifest of the plane I was on and find out who on the plane has the initials EP. She wants to know why, obviously. And he's like, eventually, you won't forget it, will you? It's important. Perhaps you should write it down, maybe in your notebook. And she said, great. Can I have my notebook back? He's like, on second thought, it's only 2 initials. You can remember that. Stay in touch, Kate. And she says, of course. And if I don't?
Yes. This page is quite confusing. I mean, it's got a lot of writing on it and written in what would be 2 vertical panels on the left and then 2 additional panels on the right. And they go top to bottom. And of course, it's all about Dirk and his getting to the United States. And he says the electronic eye's been watching him. And she says, tough titties.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm sure that a cargo hold seems draftier and rather an unsafe place to me. And they go on and on about the manifest from here. So I think we got the gist of this page.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny that this whole, over 2/3 of the panels have the drone in it.
Right.
Like this, everything is almost from the viewpoint of the drone at the end.
That's correct. Yep.
So we will move on to page 14. So the end of Kate's sentence, and if I don't stay in touch, Sigrun will. So as Dirk leaves the building, the drone is following him, And Dirk needs to find a way to lose the drone so he doesn't have this watchdog over his shoulder all the time. And he sees this couple, and he has an idea. And he asks them if they might have a quick chat in the bathroom, which, awkward. And the guy asks him if you're selling or buying. And Dirk says, both are equally unlikely, but I just need a moment of your time. I have a rather fashionable proposition for you, which is pretty telegraphing of what's about to come.
Exactly. Of course, the gentleman in this couple that he molests on the street is wearing a hooded jacket, which I'm assuming is Dirk's plan here. And for some reason, I just noticed that, of course, Dirk has lost his little red hat.
He has. I didn't notice that either.
And he's wearing in the middle panel, you can see his socks, and they're pink and gray stripes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Quite fashionable.
On to page 15. So we jump to the tea shop where Dirk is sitting with Crowther, Hamish, and Craig. And Crowther is a little jealous because he never gets clothes that nice when he offers to trade with people. And Hamish can't believe just a hoodie threw off the drone. And Craig is amazed at the technology of this era.
Mm-hmm.
But now we see that Dirk threw away the page but kept the notebook so he could pencil shade the page underneath to get a copy of the drawing, which he feels is very important. But he just wanted Kate to be thrown off the track and tell her that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And outside, you can see that Susan and Tanya are talking. And Susan does not like everything that's been going on, the whole scene at the hotel, and the reborn person, Craig. It's just too much for her. But Tanya's excited because they're actually on a case, and doesn't that excite Susan? And she's like, a little bit, but not in a good way. And she's upset that Tanya hasn't practiced for the gala in days. So I did misspeak in one of the previous books that the gala was happening when it was just a rehearsal that Tanya was attending. Mm-hmm. So the gala hasn't happened yet. That was just a rehearsal, but Tanya has not been practicing. And Tanya said, are things really that weird? And at that moment, a drone comes over their head, and Tanya concedes that, yes, things are that weird.
Yep, I like this. And of course, now I'm going to catch myself up in something. I mean, at least in this panel in the middle of the page, we see Tanya and Susan through the window.
Yes.
And then the next panel on the center page, you see them outside.
Yes.
And here on this outside view, you see Tanya's actually wearing a deerstalker hat. You know, the classic Holmes detective hat.
Yes.
And I don't recall her wearing one of those earlier.
I don't remember that either, but she's getting into the role.
That she is.
So we'll go to page 16. So we're still in the tea shop, and they're trying to translate the drawings, and nobody seems to be able to. So Crowther takes his gold solar-powered phone, and Hamish takes the phone from Crowther and takes a picture of the page, and then uses the internet and searches and gets a translation of what's on that page. And it's pretty funny because Dirk has no idea that that's even possible, and he says he's got many questions, and without translating those symbols, we're impossibly far from, and Hamish goes, got them. And he's like, we're drawing closer with every move. So it turns out that those symbols mean reborn. And he's like, that's it? That's kind of obvious. How do you know? And Hamish says, the internet. And Dirk is impressed, and Hamish is like, not really. So Hamish then asks if he thinks that he is partner material for Dirk, and he's like, nope, you're too needy. And now he wants Craig to fill them in on the missing details.
Right. And of course, I do like this page and a couple of its minor details. On the third panel down, you see Crowther picking his nose.
Yes.
And the fourth panel, he's picking at his ear.
Right.
But the best joke on the whole page is on the first one.
Yes, it is.
Where Dirk is asking Craig if he can translate, and Craig says, no, sorry, man, I was a drama major.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
So, page 17.
So, once again, we're given a new style, a new design on this page.
Yep.
In the page that you'll discuss, of course, Craig is flashing back to the original story of his life, and there are 3 bubbles that show the past on a stark white page with Dirk in the bottom and Craig at the top.
Yeah. Craig is going to talk about way back when they were in Egypt, they met this guy, Mr. Bird, who was immortal and said that he could help them be the same. And he talked about soul transfers and that he'd wake us up from sleeping death when he was ready. But he kept waking Craig up periodically when he needed a travel companion, and he never woke up Neferhotep, or Hot. And he asked once why, and Mr. Bird shrugged it off, saying, if you want it the other way around. He's like, oh, no, that's okay. And he stopped asking him.
So now we understand that when Craig says he's a little better traveled than Hot, we understand what that means.
Yes. And it looks like in the middle of the panel, every time he had to wake up Craig, he would need a person to have the life energy revive and re-wake Craig. And it looks like a Spanish conquistador there.
It does. Perhaps Ponce de Leon?
Yes, so that would be a nice nod to the Fountain of Youth and this living forever immortality. However, I don't ever remember Ponce de Leon having died from mummification.
Well, that's true. But they have, at least as they're claiming, that the transfer of soul energy is not something that causes death. It's just borrowed.
Yes.
So here in the bottom panel of this page, Craig is relating that Mr. Bird doesn't like the megalomaniacal competition, and that's why he believes he's never actually woken up Neff before.
Right, because he has greater appetites than Craig. And Craig does at the very end say that there was something odd, though. And hopefully we will find out on page 18 what that something odd was. Just when you think it can't get any stranger, you come to this page.
Oh, gosh.
Craig is relaying a time where he was traveling through the centuries with Mr. Bird, and they ran into another time traveler. This guy said call him Reg, and he's quite lost. And he has a new cellular phone, and it works marginally better than his faulty office phone, but now that he's got a new phone, he can travel through time again. And none of this really made sense to Mr. Bird, but he really liked the idea of that old phone that the Regent gave him. And Dirk said, Regis is likely more accurate if I'm right about who you met. And Craig is like, yeah, that guy. So Bird went forward, so he took me back to Egypt to test his new phone, but he lost the cell signal. And that created a screwy time glitch, so Craig keeps playing out a repeating loop, sometimes out of order. And Dirk thinks that, so you know how this all ends. And Craig said, sadly, it's different every time.
Yes, our favorite little time loop. But again, my favorite line is the little Easter egg they left in here when they're talking about Reg. They say in a little box it says, really? Another time traveler? Possibly an older gentleman in an easy chair with an old phone, perhaps? And then there's a little asterisk at the end of the comment, and there's an editor's note, as seen in the first Dirk Gently novel, E.D.
Yes, absolutely. They have included Reg traveling through time, meeting up with Craig and Mr. Bird.
even though his phone was broken in the original story, apparently when the days of cell phone came into play, he was able to recreate it or get a new phone that allows him to time travel.
Lucky Reg. Except he's traveling in a loop with Craig.
Mm-hmm.
So page 19. So after Craig's explanation, Dirk gets up and starts pacing, and he seems to be preoccupied by this bird person. And he keeps going, bird, 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 bird. That's it. And then he erases the menu board and gets out a piece of chalk, and he starts drawing and erasing on the board. And Susan is all disappointed because now there goes their menu board, of which he says that the menu board is the least necessary thing available in that establishment. While he is drawing on the board and trying to figure something out, he says that a previous mention of a certain bird and phones, and at that moment the phone rings. And Susan says, well, you might as well answer it because I know it's for you. So he answers the phone, and it's Kate. And even though that's exactly what happened on this page, I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
I think it makes sense. Oh my gosh.
That's why they're supposed to watch the video.
But we don't know what this bird reference is all about, right?
Oh no, I have a bad feeling. Are you getting the same bad feeling?
No. I'm not sure.
Who's the bird?
Who's the bird? Thor?
The Guide Mark II.
Oh no, really?
I said I'm getting a bad feeling.
Oh gosh. That could be.
But that's not Dirk Gently. It can't be.
No.
That would be a crossover.
They're crossing the beams.
Well, they have crossed the beams in references, right?
Uh-huh.
They've used the word harmless. In that one party scene, there was a whole bunch of Hitchhiker references, and right?
Right, absolutely.
The other thing is the eagle.
The eagle?
The eagle that was the jet, or the pilot.
Right.
Is another bird that was actually in Dirk Gently.
Right.
But I don't know how that would have anything to do with time travel. Do you know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Could it be that we're seeing the Mark II in action again?
So on to page 20. So Kate has called Dirk to warn him that the gentleman just about to enter the tea shop is a serial killer because she is watching with the drone. And Bill Parsnip enters the tea shop, puts a chair under the doorknob, and says, hang up the phone and no one move. And Dirk says he's going to have to call Kate back when, or quite possibly if, he is able to. And Bill comes up to Dirk and says it was very rude of him to take that bag and go get it. And Dirk is like, oh, that was yours? So hard to know. You really might consider tying a colorful ribbon around it.
Oh, my gosh.
Dirk said he was also interested in the rather curious instruments in it, and that he and his wife have some strange proclivities. And Bill said, very rude indeed, and he is the one to teach proper manners. And there's some forced perspective on this knife because it looks huge.
It does indeed. Oh my gosh. Quite the weapon that he pulls out from his jacket.
Yes. So they must have specially designed clothes and bags to carry the weapons the way they do.
Apparently so. And here he doesn't look anything like Ward Cleaver.
No, not at all.
Oh my gosh, quite the angular face.
Page 21.
Well, this is the final cover page.
Oh, so that even though it did not have a to be continued,
it doesn't.
It just says next month.
The penultimate chapter in Dirk Gently's first big comic book storyline. It's time for the museum, gala, and all the otherworldly mayhem that ensues. And on this page, we see Dirk in his...
walking like an Egyptian.
I was going to say Mort and...
Rick and Morty.
Okay, right. We see Dirk running away from what looks like zombies and mummies and Mr. Bird in his Rick and Morty face.
Yes.
And quite the panic.
And it uses in that little blurb, I think if I had to pick a favorite word of all time, it would be penultimate. I love the word penultimate.
Oh, yes.
Simply because it sounds more impressive than ultimate, which it's one less than ultimate.
It's one fewer than ultimate.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. I love it. I love it. If you only had a portmanteau to add to it.
That's right. So this was a rather abrupt ending.
You're right. It is a rather blunt ending.
So Dirk is about to be taught some manners.
Now that we've come to the conclusion of this comic book, next we will be covering the fourth book in this series.
Yes. And it might be a week, it might be 2 weeks, it might be 3 weeks. Not sure. It's all going to depend on how editing goes.
Quite the challenge. And I hope the folks that listen to our podcast as a podcast pop over to the YouTube page so that they, in fact, can see the visuals that we are describing as we go through the book.
Absolutely. So now that you've told us what we're doing the next time, I think this is the end. Thank you for listening to this. A new episode is released on the first Thursday of every month. A special thank you goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettyneatidea.buzzsprout.com. While there, you can find links to all of my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can contact us via email at digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook at Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. You can message us on Twitter, or should I say X, at Watches Idea. And our Instagram is Watches Idea Podcast.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.